Hello and welcome to the garden. It is blazing hot here today. The weather's just mad. 1 minute it's freezing cold and the next it's blazing hot. But this is like a full-on summer's day and I don't want to be in the greenhouse for too long. So today is all about the brassicas. I've got some to pot on and others to plant out. So I've been sowing various batches of brassicas, well, over the last couple of months, and some of those are ready to go. So these I'm just going to pot on. This is Copenhagen Market and Brunswick, both nice cabbages. The Brunswick, well, some of those look good and some of them look a little bit sad. The Copenhagen Market is looking a lot better. These I could put straight out, of course. They're certainly large enough for that. But as always, I like to grow on the brassicas and plant out a slightly more substantial plant. And I think that way they establish better and they're less susceptible to pests. So I've got a slightly richer potting mix here and good sized pots. I'll take the largest of these. And there's plenty of root down in this plug, so that's good. I will set those reasonably deep. And these I will firm in quite solidly. They don't want to be wobbling around. And I'll pack the compost in there. Set quite deep. The brassicas always respond well, I think, to setting reasonably deep. As soon as the roots have filled these pots, I will be planting these out. At this time of year, with everything starting to really grow away now, that's probably only going to be a week or two. So all they need is a good soak, and then I'll pop them back in one of the other greenhouses. Although it's so warm at the moment, I could just leave these outside, but I will move them outside after a while. They're uncovered in the greenhouses, so they get some cool evenings, but it's certainly really warm for them in there today. So I'm standing in the more or less north-facing border now. This is the shadiest part of the kitchen garden, and it's a bit of an experiment this year to see how this border works. We didn't have this in the garden last year. This was actually part of the chicken enclosure. This border does get afternoon sun, and right now I suppose the sun is, well, about 3/4 of the way back towards the fence. So the shadiest part is along the back, and the rest of it I think will be perfectly okay for, certainly for the brassicas and other leafy veg. So that's what I'm sort of concentrating on in this border this year. So I've got a load of brassicas to plant out, but the first thing I've got to do is remove some weed. There were two things that the chickens never ate, and one was nettles and the other is bramble, and I appear to have both here. Now I did think I'd got all of the root out, but I've clearly missed some, so there'll be some bits of root down here that I really need to try and get out. And as always, this is hard and stony, but at least there are worms in here. The soil itself doesn't look too bad. It's been fertilized by the chickens for many years, so the brassicas should like that. I'm not actually finding any large roots here. It looks as though these have just been thrown up from ever such small pieces. They don't need a lot of root to spring up, but I'm hoping they're not going to keep coming back throughout the whole year. That would be really annoying. Oh, there's not a lot of root in here. I'm probably not deep enough for those. Let's have a look. No, I'm really not finding any root. Ah, what's that? There it is. Yeah. Now that goes straight down vertically, so there's no way to really get that out, but hopefully if I keep taking off this top growth, that should get rid of it. I've got most of the root out of here. I will have to keep on top of that during this season to make sure that it doesn't come back. I dug so much bramble and nettle out of this bed. It was all along the boundaries, well, pretty much where this board is, and yeah, it really flourished there. The chickens left it alone. More or less everything else the chickens would eat as soon as it showed a hint of green, but not this stuff, and well, to be honest, I don't blame them. So I'm just going to lay out a few of the plants and get a feel for how much I can fit into this space. Now, we are running a little bit short of space this year, thanks to some deviations from the original planting scheme. I put in far too many alliums of various sorts, and that's having a bit of a knock-on effect in other parts of the garden. And the garden is also a little bit smaller than it was last year before the renovations. So I'm going to lay out those plants probably at slightly closer spacings than would be ideal. And I'll see what I can get in here. I need to leave room for 1 or 2 rows of swede later in the year. I'll probably sow those next month. We don't grow many swede. I really don't like them particularly. My wife likes them, but we grow them particularly for a finished Christmas dish. So I do want to have some in here, but I'm not sure how much room we'll have for those until I've laid these out. Well, I don't think that's too bad. I was debating whether I could get 5 plants across this bed, but I really do need to be able to get to this back fence because of the trees we're training along the back here. So I've got to get to the sour cherries, and that means I can't plant too far that way. I think the spacings as they are now will probably work reasonably well. If I try to get a 5th plant in that row, I think then they might be rather crowded. So I think I'm going to leave it as it is. So what I've got here are 6 plants of Nero and then 6 of broccoli. Then I've got 4 each of cauliflower and Calabrese. I do have another couple of plants of each of those, but I don't think I can realistically fit them in, because then I want to get I think 3 rows of cabbages here, the ones I've just potted on, so I need to leave this space. they'll come out in a week or two as soon as they've filled out those pots. And then I've got room for maybe 1 row of swede, 2 at the most. And I think that's going to have to do. I will have, of course, more brassicas later in the year, but hopefully by then I will start clearing some of the earlier crops away. They can probably go in when I take peas and beans out of this bed. So yeah, I think that's going to work. So I'm just loosening the soil in these planting holes a little bit. This ground is pretty compact. And then in the bucket I've got a mixture of fish blood and bone, lime and some chicken pellets. Now I don't need much, but I'm just going to put a little bit in each hole. Mix that in with the soil. And that's all stuff that the brassicas should like. I will set those a little deeper than they were in the pots and give them a really good firming in. And on this soil, that's rather easier to do than it is in the light soil of our beds. So some spots here are easier to dig than others. That's usually places where I've taken out some weed. It's probably a bramble or a nettle here last autumn that came out, and that's loosened the soil. I'll see how this stuff does this year, but if I'm not happy with it, I may go back to a bit of traditional winter digging in the borders. I'd prefer not to have to do that. Not just because I think the soil probably would prefer it if I didn't, but I don't particularly want to have to put that effort in. But we'll see. If the plants establish okay and they grow all right in the soil, then I will just put a thick layer of compost across this in the winter. I think this border might be quite handy for growing certain things in the sort of like the heat of summer, but I think it would be a poor place to grow anything or to have anything overwintering. It would just be too cold and miserable here in the winter. Well, that's always a wonderful sight when the beds start to fill up with new crops. So I've got 20 brassica plants in, and they're probably a little bit too close, but I think they're going to be okay. And I've still got room for the 3 rows of cabbage later on. I've got one more thing to get in the ground today, and that is some tatsoi. Now these are just stunning plants. Nothing to do with me, it's the nature of the plant. I really love the leaf form and the way they grow in a really attractive rosette. These sort of spoon-shaped deep green leaves with the pale ribs. It's a very attractive plant, but it's not really the right time of year for tatsoi. I think along with a lot of the oriental greens, these are best sown a little bit later to then grow and crop in the cooler parts of the year. So I will certainly be sowing a variety of oriental greens later in the year, but these were a really early sowing, and I thought I'd just give it a go and see if I can get a crop off of them before they bolt, because these will, as conditions warm up, I think these will run to seed pretty quickly. Because I sowed these so early, I think I should get a harvest out of these. I'm not sure yet whether I'm going to pick individual leaves for the salad or take the whole plant as a cooked vegetable, but I'm not going to let them get too big, and I'm certainly going to grab them before there's any sign of them running to seed. So I need to find somewhere to put these. I'm short of space and I want this to be a shady spot, so this north facing border is ideal, and I'm going to put these up close to the fence. Now, although I need to get access to along this fence to get to the trees for their training, the little bit of ground along the very base of the fence, that's kind of dead space, and that's where I set out some of the dwarf broad beans earlier in the year, and I think these could be fine there. Now the sun has just gone over enough to light up the base of the fence, so these are only going to get quite late afternoon sun, and they should be quite happy in the cooler, slightly shadier conditions along the base of the fence there, and hopefully that will discourage them from bolting too quickly. Now these can develop quite a substantial rosette of leaves, but I'm going to plant these a little bit closer together because I'm not going to let the plants get to that sort of size. I'll either be picking the outer leaves and letting the inner ones grow on, or then I'll be taking the whole plants before they get too big for this space. But these are nice little plants, nice root system, not pot bound, but perfect for planting out now. Rather better than the lettuce I laid out recently. That had definitely gone a bit too far. And the soil's a lot lighter along the boundary here from when this fence was put in last year, so a digger came through along the boundary, and that's why this is so much easier, so much easier to get into. So I've got a nice row of Tatsoi along the back of the border here, and I don't think it will be too long before we get to eat that, actually. A few weeks, but not too long. I think as the temperatures are warming up now, things like this are going to grow away pretty quickly. I will have to cover these brassicas at the moment because of the pigeons, later of course because of the cabbage white butterflies. There's nothing I can do about the tatsoi. They're just going to have to take their chances with the pigeons. At some point in the next few weeks I will put up some kind of framework and drape some proper butterfly netting over it. For now though, I'm just going to run some mesh over the top. I've got some handy, and that's quick and easy just to drape on them while they're small plants. So I will get that done before I pack up, so that the plants are still here in the morning. But anyway, that is all for this video. So thank you very much for watching, and bye for now.